All right, moving on to learning objective two, some more introduction material. So a little bit about the organizations that govern accounting. Let me just fix this a little so you can see. There we go. So some important organizations that oversee the accounting profession include the Financial Accounting Standards Board, which we refer to as FASB, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, which we refer to as the SEC. You've probably heard of them. So the Securities and Exchange Commission is, of course, run a government agency. It oversees FASB. They are ultimately in charge of the accounting profession and their rules. However, they almost historically always defer to FASB's discretion in creating the rules of accounting. So the Financial Accounting Standards Board creates and oversees our accounting standards, which are very important to keep intact the integrity and the product of what we put forth. Okay, I think the slides jumped a little bit, sorry. But anyway, FASB is responsible for developing our rules or standards in accounting. Any public company must adhere to these rules, and those rules are referred to as generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. So whenever I refer to it in the classroom, or if you're not in the classroom watching these videos, I will always refer to them as GAAP. Down here, the second bullet, it emphasizes that the information, the rules are in place to certainly make sure that the information we put together and present to these external users is complete, accurate, free from error. There is no bias while putting it together, so that they have the best information possible to make decisions regarding how to allocate their own personal resources. That is called faithful representation. The making sure the information is complete, neutral, and free from error. We also want to make sure the standards also provide, or GAAP also provides, that the information is relevant. It's important. Without this information being included, we may make a alternative decision. So you want to make sure any information that would sway you decision-wise is included in our financial reporting. I didn't mention the previous slide, but FASB, obviously the SEC is a US government agency. FASB is US based, GAAP is US. However, as many of you probably know, companies operate worldwide. There are many companies you have to invest in. They are not typically held to GAAP standards. There are international financial reporting standards that are dictated by the International Accounting Standards Board. And so IFRS is the equivalent of the US's GAAP. And the IASB is the equivalent of FASB. Now, over the years, they have tried to converge and make their rules and their procedures and guidelines the same, so that when a potential investor comes into play and they are comparing companies in different countries, that technically they are comparing apples to apples. They know they prepare and they use the same guidelines. We've been able to converge some of our principles. Some of them are the same, but it is unlikely that we will be able to reach that sort of compromise on every part of the financial statement. I'll mention those as we go along and throughout the course. Like, this is an area where we agree with GAAP and IFRS are the same. This is an area where they're not. So it's very important, if you are, planning to kind of be an international investor, that you understand the rules. Okay, so quickly, there are 4 really guiding principles under GAAP that we sort of cover in this class. We're going to focus on one of them right now in this chapter, the economic entity assumption. Okay, the economic entity assumption tells us that a business is a separate entity or unit separate from its owners. So you can be formed into many different types of businesses. Some of the options are listed here. You can be a sole proprietorship. So if any of you have a painting business or if you bake or if you babysit or anything like that, that might be considered a sole proprietorship, where it's just the one person who runs a business by themselves. You could become more complex as a business evolves, or more people become part owner or a partner in a business. So you could become a partnership or perhaps a corporation or a limited liability company. Those are all different formations of business which are possible. A partnership is when there is one or more partners who come together to run a business. Usually accounting firm, law firms, things like that are often partnerships. A corporation is its own separate entity. It is owned by the stockholders. So people who buy stock are the owners of that corporation. And a limited liability is much like a partnership, except it does have some potential advantages in terms of the owners protecting themselves from any liability and exposure to various forms of litigation. So I'm going to end this here right now. I'm going to start right where I left off on video number 3.